Hello everyone. Today we'll follow a very special love story, one where fate unexpectedly intertwines the lives of three strangers. Dan, a righteous local police officer. Dieuhan, a man with a past carrying a deep emotional scar. And Dieuhan, a single mother, small in stature but strong in spirit, alongside her young son Tom, an innocent child longing for a complete family. The story begins in the heart of a bustling city. It is there that Dieuhan, carrying her little boy, leaves behind a poor countryside in a very personal journey to find her biological parents, who had been lost to her since she was a child. But she had no idea that this journey, seemingly hers alone, would pull two men into its orbit. They did not plan to meet. They said nothing. But silently, they both watched over her. Don rides his motorbike through forests and over mountains to reach the place where she was once abandoned. Thon drives through the night, crossing hundreds of kilometers just to gather a clue that might help Han and her son. They do not fight. They do not compete. But in every action, in every glance, we see clearly they are both drawn to one woman. Dieuhan. In this story, there are no heroes, no perfect people, only individuals, each with their own hidden wounds, trying to heal someone else's pain. Dieuhan, once a woman who no longer believed in love, now stands between two choices. One man is always there when she falls, the other quietly supports her every step, every journey. And Tom, barely over a year old, with those bright, innocent eyes, is already calling one of them Dad in his dreams. So in the end, who will walk beside her through the years to come? Don, with his devoted heart and steady mind, or Ta, who would give up his future just to see her smile? And what about Dieuhan? Will she ever discover the truth about her identity? And if she does, will that truth change the course of her life and the feelings of those around her? It was a day without rain, yet without sunshine. The air was strangely calm and pure. She held baby Tom, her not yet 2-year-old son, close to her chest. Looking at his innocent face, Han suddenly realized she couldn't keep living like this. She didn't want her son to grow up in a remote forest with no future, no answers about where he came from. She herself had lived her entire life not knowing who her real parents were or where they might be. And now she was ready to search for them. All she had was an old address scribbled on a yellowed piece of paper and a faded photo of a middle-aged man, supposedly her father. But Han no longer hesitated. She had decided she would walk to the nearest town and find a way to reach the city. That morning, she strapped Tom to her chest and slowly walked along a winding dirt path through the forest. The leaves above rustled gently. A soft breeze blew through the trees, as if whispering silent encouragement. Suddenly, in the distance, the sound of a motorbike echoed through the woods. A familiar figure appeared. It was Don, the local police officer from her village, the man who had quietly protected and cared for Han all these years. He stopped the bike and walked over. Han, why are you and the baby walking through the forest like this? Where are you going? Han looked up, slightly startled, then sighed. I've decided to go to the city. I want to find my birth parents. I can't live like this anymore. Dan stared at her for a long moment. His eyes were filled with concern and tenderness. He didn't ask more. He simply said gently, "Let me take you and the baby to the city. I'll help you." Han went quiet. She felt the warmth in his words from a man who had never once let go of her hand. Finally, she nodded. That afternoon, the three of them, Dan, Han, and baby Tom, left the forest together. On his old motorbike, Dan drove steadily in front, while Han sat behind him, cradling Tom tightly in her arms. After hours of bumpy mountain roads, they reached a paved road leading out to the city. There, Han caught a long-distance bus. She boarded with Tom in her arms, but not before turning back and bowing deeply to Dan. "Thank you so much." Dan said nothing. He simply stood there, watching. The bus slowly pulled away, shrinking into the distance, until it became a small black dot at the end of the road. That night, Dan couldn't sleep. His mind kept replaying the image of Han holding her child, wandering through a vast city, where she had no relatives, no friends, no one to lean on. He was worried she might face danger, worried that if anything happened, he wouldn't be there to protect her. The next morning, Dan made up his mind. He couldn't sit still any longer. He packed a few changes of clothes, some dried food, and got back on his motorbike. This time, he wasn't just traveling. He was going after her, to be there during the hardest days. The journey was longer and more exhausting than he had imagined. Though used to rugged terrains, riding all day through mountains and slippery trails pushed him to the limit. As dusk settled, Dan stopped in a forest clearing by the road. There were no houses, no shelter, only a blanket and a few tools to build a makeshift tent. He lay down, shivering in the cold, body aching, but his mind was far from calm. He thought of Han, of Tom, and of the look in her eyes before she left. Under the faint moonlight filtering through the trees, Dan silently prayed for their safety. Though the road ahead was long and filled with hardships, he had made up his mind. He would stay by their side, no matter what. Over on this side, Han couldn't sit still either. Inside him, it felt like a fire was burning. He had never felt such worry before. Han knew that Han was stepping into a completely unfamiliar world, the bustling city, noisy and full of dangers. As a single mother, Han would face countless difficulties, carrying little Tom alone through the crowded streets, with no relatives and no place to lean on. Han was an engineer, always busy with work, but this time he couldn't put his worries aside. He immediately took leave, arranged everything, and set off to find the mother and child. Though he didn't know exactly where they were, he was determined to go to the city with one goal: to find Han and Tom and bring them back safely. Stepping into the city, Han felt overwhelmed. Tall buildings towered above him, traffic was congested, and people hurried past each other as if they were strangers. But Han didn't care about any of that. There was only one thing on his mind. Where was Han? Day after day, Han wandered through every street, stopped at every small restaurant, bus station, and market, asking anyone who might have seen Han. Each time he got a tiny clue, he rushed there with hope in his heart. But time and time again, hope slipped away. No one knew anything about Han. The worry inside Han grew heavier. He knew he couldn't leave them alone. But no matter how hard he tried, there was still no trace. Han grew increasingly exhausted, both physically and mentally. One night, after driving a long distance without rest, he was completely worn out. He returned to his parked car on the roadside, leaned back on the seat, his heart heavy and eyes full of despair. Fortunately, Hoy, Tan's close manager and friend, noticed something was wrong after Tan missed calls and didn't respond to messages. He immediately went to find Tan and took him home to rest and recover. Tan slowly regained his strength. He was fed and cared for after days of exhaustion. But even as his body healed, Than's eyes remained full of worry. He couldn't forget Han and little Tom. That fateful evening, the car slowly stopped beside the main road, headlights cutting through the rain, casting blurred streaks of light on the wet pavement. Tharin and Hui got out, each holding an umbrella. Their eyes scanned the surroundings cautiously, hands clenched tight. Following his memory, they returned to the old house Dieuhan had heard about, the place where Han and little Tom might be held. The narrow path leading to the house was slippery and dark, surrounded by wild grass and a strong musty smell. No sound, no response. Hui called out loudly, "Dieuhan! Dieuhan! Is anyone home?" Suddenly, from the dark side of the house, a figure slipped out. Phuc, pale-faced, eyes darting nervously. "Who's there? Who are you to barge into my house?" he shouted, voice filled with panic. Hai stepped forward calmly. "We're friends of Dieuhan. We just want to see her." Phuc stammered, voice trembling. "There's no one named Dieuhan here. Get out!" But before he could finish, a terrified woman's scream came from deep inside the dilapidated house. "Help me! Is anyone out there? Please save me and my child." Than and Hai froze. Than's heart skipped a beat. It was Han. Phuc went stiff, realizing everything was exposed, and immediately turned to run toward the back of the house. "He's running." "Hui, chase him!" Than yelled. Without hesitation, Than rushed to the door where the cries came from. He knocked hard, hands shaking with worry, voice urgent. "Is anyone in there?" "Open the door. I'm here to help." Inside, Han clutched Tom tightly, trembling like a leaf in the wind. Her voice was hoarse and scared. "Who's there? Are you an accomplice of that man? Don't come near." At that moment, Than choked up. His voice softened, gentle and sincere. "Han? It's me, Than. Open the door for me. It's okay now. I'm here." The world seemed to hold its breath. That voice, that warmth. Han was stunned for a moment, tears streaming down her face. Her trembling hands unlocked the latch. The door swung open. Than immediately rushed in, saying nothing, wrapping his arms around Han and little Tom, both shaking in the corner. Outside, the rain kept falling. Each drop pattering on the rusty tin roof added to the tense, suffocating, and emotional atmosphere. Han sobbed uncontrollably in Than's embrace. She could no longer hold back. All her fear, pressure, and despair burst out into tears. "Han, are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere?" "Oh my God, I've been searching everywhere for you," Than asked urgently, gripping her shoulders tightly, afraid that if he let go, she might disappear again. Han sobbed, choking on her words. "I'm okay. I was so scared. But how did you know where I was? How did you find this place?" Than, voice thick with emotion, stroked her hair. "I searched for you for days. I thought you might have gone to Dieuhan's place. When I saw the heavy rain, I still came back to this path. Luckily, I got here in time." "And that bastard, did he hurt you?" Han shook her head, eyes still frightened. "No, I ran away in time. But Dieuhan, I don't know where she is anymore." Than held her hand firmly, eyes steady. "It's okay. I'm here now. You and Tom are safe. The rest, just leave it to the police." Han nodded softly. Her eyes were still tinged with sadness, but inside shone a glimmer of hope, of trust, and of knowing she was no longer alone. Don and Than, two men with very different personalities, yet both drawn to one woman named Han, each with deep feelings, though no two feelings are alike. Don quietly supports from behind the scenes, investigating every clue with professional rigor, always believing that everything will soon be resolved if the process is followed correctly. Meanwhile, Dieuhan lets his heart lead the way. Despite his busy work life, he cannot sit still. He doesn't wait, but decides to dive in himself, stepping into the city, navigating the most dangerous corners, all driven by an anxious heart and an indescribable love. Both carry the burning desire to protect Han, but while Don is still caught up in Larry's and plans waiting for approval, Han acts on instinct, on his heart, on the daring risk of someone willing to leave everything behind, and it is Ta who finds Han first. In a dilapidated house, under the pouring rain, he embraces the frightened woman and the little boy Tom in her arms. In that moment, all the waiting, all the pain, all the seemingly hopeless journey are erased by a hug, tears, and whispered words. Don, meanwhile, is still roaming the winding alleys of the city, asking every person, every lodging, with hopes that rise and fall repeatedly. In the end, the one who stands by Han when she needs it most is not the one who knows best how to investigate, but the one who dares to abandon everything to find her, even if it is for the faintest glimmer of hope.
Danh và Thành, hai người đàn ông, hai tính cách khác biệt, cùng hướng về một người phụ nữ tên Hân, với những tình cảm sâu sắc, nhưng chẳng ai giống ai. Danh âm thầm hỗ trợ từ phía sau, điều tra từng manh mối bằng nghiệp vụ, luôn tin rằng mọi chuyện sẽ sớm được làm sáng tỏ nếu đi đúng quy trình. Còn Thành lại để trái tim dẫn lối. Anh không thể ngồi yên dù công việc bộn bề, không chờ đợi mà quyết định dấn thân tự mình bước vào thành phố, chạm vào những góc ngách nguy hiểm nhất, tất cả chỉ vì một nỗi lo trong lòng và một tình cảm không thể gọi tên. Trong căn phòng cũ nát, dưới trời mưa xối xả, anh ôm chầm lấy người phụ nữ đang run rẩy vì sợ hãi, và cậu bé Tôm bé nhỏ trong lòng cô. Khoảnh khắc ấy, mọi chờ đợi, mọi đau khổ, mọi hành trình tưởng như vô vọng bỗng được xóa nhòa bằng một cái ôm, bằng nước mắt, bằng lời nói thì thầm. Còn Danh vẫn đang miệt mài giữa con hẻm ngoằn ngoèo thành phố, dò hỏi từng người, từng khu trọ, những hy vọng lặp đi lặp lại rồi lại vụt tắt. Cuối cùng, người ở bên cạnh Hân khi cô gần nhất không phải là người biết cách điều tra giỏi nhất, mà là người dám buông bỏ tất cả để đi tìm cô, dù chỉ là một tia hy vọng mong manh.